All right, simple short lesson today. This is how to attach a prop to make it look like it's moving. So we've kind of done this with the elevators before. Um, However, this one is a little bit easier. We're going to do a train on this one, and I'm going to show you what it looks like here real quick. When I hit the trigger, here comes the train. All right, so let's look at the pieces of this real quick. So the trick to this is there is a brush right here that I've converted to a track train. So if you remember, you just take your block tool, you make a box, then you right click on that box, tie to entity, and I made it into a Func track train. You're going to give it a name, and then we'll come back to the first stop target. The speed is how fast it's going to move. And then don't forget this one here, height above track. So the default is 4 inches, which will lift this 4 inches above the track. I set it to 0 so I can kind of dictate it. It's a little bit easier for me. But otherwise, it's pretty simple. I usually set it to 0. You could leave it at 4 if you want. Just be aware it's going to lift up 4 inches once the game starts. The first stop target, this is where it's going to move to when it spawns. Now, the track train follows these things right here. So these are path tracks. We've used these before when we made elevators. So when this track train comes into the game, it's going to spawn in this location. So you're going to put path tracks along the path that you want the train to follow, or the car, or the airplane, or the boat, or whatever. You're usually going to have at least 2. All right, so you can see I have 2 of them here. And you're going to want to name them in sequence. So I named this one Car Track 1, and then its next stop target is where the object is going to go from here. So it's going to go to that one over there. So if we fly over here, here's my second path track, and you can see that its name is Car Track 2. There is no next stop target because this is the end of the line. Orientation, face direction of motion. For a moving vehicle, this is important because this is going to keep us moving in the right direction. We don't need to do any flags or anything on that. All right, so the basic setup is a track train, Func track train, which is just a block typically covered with no draw. You give it a name. The first stop target is the first path track on your map. You're going to set the speed to how fast you want it to go, and the height above track is going to be 0 typically. All right. Now, the train itself is a simple dynamic prop. Now, I use dynamic override. It's either going to be a prop dynamic or a dynamic override. Either one of those will work. The thing with this prop is its parent is going to be this guy right here, the track train that's hidden underneath it. And if you remember, the way parent and children relationships work is that this child object will follow its parent, and it will always maintain this relationship right here. So that means that this track train is always going to be in this position under the train. So the train is going to ride on this track train. Now, because of that, I can add a second train car here using the exact same thing. I can just parent it to the same Func track train. Because of that parent relationship, what it means is that this object will always be, whatever this is, 20 feet behind its parent. This object will always remain on top of its parent. This will always be behind the parent. They will always maintain this initial distance by default. So you could have as many train cars going back here as you wanted. The main thing is that you parent these objects, okay? This is a dynamic prop, and I parent it to the name of the track train. Now, the last piece to it is you have to somehow start it. You could use a logic auto. In this case, I made a trigger, and the trigger just has a single output. On trigger, this is the name of the track train, start forward. And so what's going to happen is when my player touches this trigger, this track train right here is going to go from here to there. Now, if there was another path track, if I had more path tracks going off into the distance, it would just keep following all of them. It would go as long as I wanted it to. All right? But that's it. There's really not much to it. You need path tracks to establish the path, a track train to create the movement, dynamic props parented to the track train, and then you need to start it with either a logic auto, or in this case I'm just using a trigger. The trick to the starting it is there's an output that says start forward. That's what starts the whole thing. So whether you've got it on a button or a trigger or whatever, it just needs to start forward, and that will cause this whole group of objects to move along. So let's look at it one more time. Reload the map. There's the train. I know my trigger is here in this area, so when I hit the trigger, here it comes. All right, simple enough. All right, that is your sample for today.